Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Native Plants class by the town of North Hempstead. My name is Megan Festuca, and I am an environmental specialist with the town. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Unfortunately, on Zoom instead of in person, but we'll make the best of our situation. Before we start, I just want to remind you that everyone has been muted upon entry, and if you have any questions during the presentation, you can type them into the chat box at any time, and we're going to pause at different intervals throughout the presentation to answer your questions. So now I am pleased to introduce Rusty Schmidt. He is a landscape ecologist for the environmental consulting firm Nelson Pope and Voorhees, and he's also the president of the Long Island Native Plant Initiative. He works on many projects involving the creation of rain gardens and native plant gardens on Long Island. He's very passionate about his work, and he's helped me with putting native plants in my own landscape. So I'm going to turn it over to him to share his screen and get started with the presentation.
Thank you, Megan. And thank you for everyone that's joining. I know it's a beautiful day out there, so I'm going to try to keep this going well so that we get done on time so we can all go visit visit or plant your own garden here for in a little bit here. So I'm just opening up my presentation. I think you should all be able to see this. So, so what we're really trying to do is we're going to talk about native plants. Why are they important, and how are they helping out our environment, our native, especially our native wildlife, and protect our wildlife. So I'm just going to start right into it. So when we talk about natives, most people think this is why. It's about the birds and the bees and the butterflies, and that's true, and I'll get into that in a minute. But I want to explain why natives in other reasons first. The first one is here first. So this is actually not New York. This is in Minnesota, where I'm from originally. But I think this is a good way to show what's going on. So on the screen here, this is the Mississippi River. This is the Minnesota River coming into the Mississippi River. Minneapolis is right here. St. Paul's right here. This is the 7-county metro area. This was, this is the area, this large area is the same amount of area as Long Island, New York. It also holds the same number of people, about 4 million people. So, but what I wanted to show off here, and the reason why I'm mentioning this, is when Napoleon sold half of the United States to the United States of America, we didn't know what we really purchased, and so we sent surveyors out there to survey the land that we purchased. And when they did that, the surveyors did a very specific grid. Every mile was a marker. Between the mile markers, they identified what they saw, what kind of plants, what kind of structure, is there water in the way or not, and they really surveyed out the entire western half of the United States. A gentleman in the late 1800s, early 1900s took all of those notes and made this map. His name was Marshner, and this is the Marshner's map. And so from those notes, he actually showed what areas were in the 7-county metro area, well, across the entire state of Minnesota, before we inhabited it. And so the dark blue areas are lakes. The dark green areas are the big woods. They're maple basswood forests. They are Laura Ingalls in the big woods. That's the same kind of woods. The light tan was prairie, Little House on the Prairie. And then the oak openings, oak barrens, is actually very similar to what you see on the North Shore of Long Island. So this was what was there. This is what's left after Minneapolis, St. Paul, and its surrounding suburbs moved in. And you can see that the purple areas, there's a lot of disrupted, fragmented native areas left, and that's it. It's not much different than Long Island. Here on Long Island, the North Shore, especially since we're talking about North Hempstead, the North Shore in this area was predominantly a tree species, tree woods of tulip trees, black and red oak, beech, black birch, red maple, with an understory of eastern dogwood, the heaths like blueberries and huckleberry. We would find sweet gum and pin oaks with a few kettle ponds here and there. So this is what was here, what we would find along the North Shore. Also, an old map. This area here, most of Nassau County on the middle to south shore was the Hempstead Plains. It was the largest grassland on the East Coast. It's the most eastern prairie. It used to be 50 square miles. It's now 13 acres down by Hofstra University. And then west of here would have been the Oak Brush Plains, and then west of that is the Pine Barrens that you know, that you've come to know. So that was what was here. These yellow areas is all that's left on Long Island. And it's really just kind of to go, and you can see, like, we have a big patch of the Pine Barrens, but most of the other areas that are somewhat untouched are pieces that are associated with parks, like Comset State Park or others. So you can see that there's been a lot of disturbance, and the native plants have become more fragmented and further isolated, and that's becoming an issue. The other reason why I like to talk about native plants is their root systems. Our grasses and a lot of our garden plants have shallow roots. Turf grass has roots only a couple inches. Our things like hostas and daylilies have roots that go down a foot, 9 inches to a foot. But our native plants, and especially these prairie plants that we've been talking about, have roots that go down multiple feet. And why that's important is all plants slough off a third of their roots annually and put down new roots looking for new nutrients and new water. And those old roots decompose and decay, and they actually make healthy soils. The deeper the roots, the more opportunity for mycorrhizas, bacteria, fungi to get further into the soil column. More water soaks into the soil column. You get thicker sods and thicker soils. And because of that, it cleans water. It produces, it captures more and more carbon. One of the best carbon capture plants out there are our deep-rooted prairie plants and our trees. And so those things are all positive benefits to the environment. And so here, the Kentucky bluegrass, you can see, is only a couple inches deep, where some of these other plants, one on here, it's not native, but is found here, is this purple coneflower found in the middle. It has roots that are 6 feet deep. That's 6 times better than your hosta that's in your yard. Similar to black-eyed Susan, same thing. Our native grasses, little blue stem, big blue stem, have roots that go down about 8 feet. One of my favorite plants that I like to talk about is lead plant. It's a couple of feet tall and has roots that go down 15 feet. So these are amazing plants. If you still don't quite believe me, here is an image of grasses and flowers that have been pulled and shaken the roots out, shaken the dirt out of its roots, and then hung. This was at a number of years ago. I went to the National Arboretum and Botanical Gardens down in Washington, D.C. And when I was there, they had this display about our native plants. And you can see the plants are hung with their roots showing and how deep these roots are. This young lady here is like 5'5". You can see that these roots are being hung and are like 8 to 10 feet, and you can see that they're bound up. They're not just hanging, they're actually tied up. So you can see the full length of their roots. And so that's really important to make healthy soils and to really improve the soil health of our landscape. Remember, in the Midwest, if you remember your history, the sod busters were going out and cutting that sod to which was prairie to put in farms, and that sod was very, very thick. And the reason why we had such rich soils in the Midwest for growing was because we had deep soils that were 12, 15 feet deep of really good solid soils to grow in. So I want to talk about crops for just a second. What do you think is the biggest crop in the United States? I'll give everyone a chance to think about it for a second. And I'm talking about in acreage, the most acreage of a crop. Everyone has a guess in their head?
If anyone wants to type into the chat box their guess, they are welcome to.
Sure, I'll do that. I'll wait a second. You have a few guesses.
Someone said, can you see it? Someone said corn, grass, corn. Wheat.
Okay, those are all good guesses, but they're incorrect. The actual biggest crop in the United States is lawn. It is a crop. It is found, we water it, we fertilize it, we take care of it. There's more acreage of lawn than all of those other crops combined. So if you add up corn, wheat, soybeans, cranberries, peaches, pecans, all of them all added up in acreage, there's more lawn in the United States than there is on all those other crops combined. It's a crop. We take care of it. We water it, we fertilize it. The only thing is we don't eat it. It's not very beneficial to very many species either. Geese, Canada geese like it. It's become their new habitat, but other than that, there's not many other things that like lawn to take care of or to utilize. And we've actually converted 62,500 square miles, about 40 million acres, to suburban lawns in the US. That's about 8 times the size of New Jersey. And we convert about 2 million acres annually, about the size of Yellowstone National Park, every year. So suburbia actually supports very little biodiversity. Most yards here on Long Island have 5% or less native plants on it. And it's typically a tree or two. So what we want to do is kind of look at what are some of these alternatives. What could we do differently on our own property to improve and have healthy soils, and more importantly, to have some habitat in our ecosystem. And so if it's actually a fake picture, but it's could be Levittown, but I'm going to push the button here, and this is going to change right before your eyes what we could do on the landscape in suburbia. So it changes to where's all those opportunities, putting gardens and buffers around the yards. So I'm going to go back up one second. I'll do it again. And we're going to change that yard. Get some opportunities around with native plants. Why this is important. Insects are the biggest biome in the world. And it's the most important group of animals that transfer energy captured by plants to other animals. So it's really taking the energy our plants are collecting from the sun and photosynthesis. Our insects are utilizing those plants and putting it into their own bodies and structure, and other animals then eat those animals. And it's the most important part of our food chain. It doesn't matter how ugly they are, they're very, very important. And I'm going to say 99% of them are beneficial insects. 96% of our terrestrial birds are the birds that we like to watch that come to our bird feeders. They rear their young on insects. If there's no insects, they don't have a chance to rear young. In fact, one brood of bird tends to eat about 6,000 caterpillars. They actually have an average rate of one caterpillar every 3 minutes are brought to the little birds. And many birds, like the robins or the chickadees, have 2 broods per year. And so they actually can do 6,000 to 12,000 caterpillars they need to eat just to raise the young. They don't feed their young seeds, they feed their young with insects. If they don't have the insects, they don't have the chance. And 90% of our insects require a native plant to complete their development at some point of their stage. We actually call that plant a host plant. If you don't have the host plant, you can't have the insect. So for instance, the right-hand picture is a monarch caterpillar on milkweed. Most people know about this one, that if you don't have milkweed, you can't have monarchs. Monarch caterpillars eat the plant and the sap of the milkweed. Milkweed sap is poisonous even to us. And they eat that sap and they become poisonous, and which is why they're so brightly orange butterflies. They're orange to tell all the birds, don't eat me, I'm poisonous. And so they only become poisonous on milkweed. So if you don't have milkweed, the butterflies don't lay their eggs on the milkweed plant for the caterpillars to eat to become poisonous. The one on the bottom left is a black swallowtail butterfly. They need the plants that are in the dill, cilantro, parsley family. Queen Anne's lace is the native plant that they tend to be on, and they eat those plants to develop. One of my favorite ones is the spice bush swallowtail. It looks very much like the black swallowtail, but if you don't have spice bush, you don't have the spice bush swallowtail. The caterpillars, if the caterpillars need to hide, so caterpillars kind of do it one of a couple different ways. One is inchworms. You saw 1 million inchworms this spring. And the reason why there's 1 million of them is that the birds are eating them pretty quickly. And so if you're going to try to survive a high percentage of your population to grow to the next stage, you need to have a lot of them if you have a lot of birds. Or you need to hide, or you become poisonous. The hiding part, there are 3 examples in front of you. The bottom left is the liatrus caterpillar. It looks like the liatrus flower, and it hangs out on that flower. And the only way he can get to be a butterfly is they hide on the flower. The upper right picture is a arborvitae caterpillar, and it's this arborvitae caterpillar becomes an arborvitae moth, and it looks like an arborvitae plant, so you can see that it hides. The bottom right picture is a laurel moth. The laurel caterpillar is right in the center of that laurel leaf. So that's the caterpillar. That white band is the back of the caterpillar. Look how well that one hides. Okay, so if you don't hide, you're not poisonous. You have to have lots of them, one or the other. Every time we plant an alien plant, and an alien plant is a plant that doesn't come from this area, we're actually reducing the local insect population. And studies have shown that the areas overrun with alien plants have produced 35 times less caterpillars in biomass, and which is the most popular insect food for birds. If you don't have the caterpillars, you don't have the insect life for the birds to grow up on. And I'm going to tell you what's really interesting is that these birds are so dependent on it. It's unbelievable. So here's the next piece, an alien plant. So we all like the crepe myrtle. Crepe myrtles are becoming very popular here on Long Island. They have this beautiful summer color. They're a small tree. and I love them. I think they're absolutely a stunning tree, but they're from North Carolina. They're not from Long Island. Due to climate change, we can actually grow crepe myrtles here on Long Island. The problem, though, is they're an alien plant. They're from North Carolina. We've moved the plants, but we have not moved insects. So when you plant a crepe myrtle in your yard, even though it's absolutely stunning plant, some bees will come to it to get some nectar, but there's the insects that are associated with that plant that grow up on that plant are not here, and so we don't have the insect life that's growing on that plant, for instance. So we really wanted to stick to our native plants because they provide the habitat for our native insects that then move up the food chain. So a couple of the trees that I want to talk about first is if you have a choice to put in a shade tree and you're not sure what to put in an oak tree. There's 534 different kinds of caterpillars that grow on oaks, including those inchworms. Or black cherry. There's quite a few different plants that grow on the black cherry. Willows, birches, poplars. You can see all the way down the line that you have a lot of amazing caterpillar larvae that grow on these specific trees. Perennials, goldenrod is the #1 perennial. Goldenrod does not make you sneeze. It's a wives' tale that it's goldenrods that give you hay fever in the late fall. It's actually the mugwort and ragweed that do that. But goldenrods are an amazing source of habitat for our native caterpillars and other insects. So then asters, sunflowers, the Joe Pye weeds. The only plant that's on this list that's not native is the morning glory. The honeysuckle, the Lonicera, make sure you're getting the native honeysuckle, not the Japanese honeysuckle. To learn more about what I just explained to you, please look at Bringing Nature Home. It's a great book by Doug Tallamy. It's a pretty fast read, and it really explains why we're thinking about these birds and butterflies and how to protect them through our native plants and why. So it kind of gives a lot more detail than what I just put out there. Another great book is Pollinators by Heather Holm. Heather is actually a good friend of mine, but she has written out books of picking out the plant. You can go in there and choose a plant and what are the host species and what are the pollinators that come to that specific species. So you can be very specific to bees, butterflies, and other things that come to your yard. So this is actually a good spot to stop. I think I saw a couple questions pop up, but I didn't read them. So what were the questions?
There was just one. Someone wanted to know if you have an image of the crepe myrtle.
Oh, I will, when I'm done, I'll pull it up I'll do a Google one. I don't have one on the slide right now, but I'll show you a crepe myrtle at the end.
And there's another one about if we'll share the presentation. I'm actually going to be recording it. So either I will email it to everybody that was that registered for this, or we will be posting it on the town's website. I'm not sure yet.
If you do go to review it, please don't share it because there's a number of things in here that are proprietary that I need to, you can rewatch, but I can't have you sharing it with others, please. That's it. That's my only question. That's my only comment on that. So, okay, so I'm going to move on. Some of those host plants. So if you like the Luna moth, it's an amazing moth that comes out at night. It's a stunning, stunning moth. If you ever see one in your life, yeah, it's just so impressive. But you need the walnut family trees, hickories and sumacs, for that moth to exist. Painted lady butterfly, the most common butterfly found on Long Island, needs yarrows, pearl everlastings, and thistles. The buckeye butterfly, one of my favorite butterflies. It's just absolutely stunning. The ugliest caterpillar maybe, but it's the most stunning butterfly in my opinion. Really needs plantains and the native toadflax and snapdragons. The hackberry butterfly, it needs the hackberry tree. If you don't have hackberries, you don't get the hackberry butterfly. One of my favorite shrubs is the New Jersey tea. It's short. It's only about knee high. It has these beautiful white flowers. It needs full sun to part sun, and with that you get the little azure butterflies, summer azures, and the bluets. So you get all these little butterflies that are about the size of your pinky, stunning blue butterflies. But if you don't have the New Jersey tea, you don't get those butterflies. Why this is important is also about the pollinators. It's about the bees. Bees are in trouble for a number of reasons, and our native bees are actually better at pollinating than the hive bees, European bees. They're actually from Europe. The honeybees are actually European. Our native bees, the bumblebees and the bald-faced wasps and the masked bees and all these other bees, they do 10 times more pollinating than the honeybees, and they are amazing little creatures that we need to help protect. Most of them are ground nesters. So this is actually a mining bee coming out of a hive right there on the right, and on the left are bumblebee hives. So if you see these little mounds that the holes are too big, that they can't be ants, they're actually bumblebees nests that they go underground, and they leave a ball of pollen. It's called a pollen ball, a ball of pollen with and nectar, and then they lay it in a hole and they lay their egg on that pollen ball. When the egg hatches, the larvae eats that pollen ball, grows into, gets to an adult and comes out and starts off. The first bees that you see in the spring are all female. They're the big queens. They're going out and creating their own nests and getting started, and then they produce the males as the season progresses. That helps get their new colonies started, and then and off they go to start the next year. So most bees are ground nesters, but there are a number of cavity nesters. The bottom right is a mason bee. The top ones are carpenter bees. They're the big moth bees. They're similar, and they actually grow inside stems or wood. They make their own nests. Most of them are rotted wood, or in little cavities or in stems. Many of our best bees are like the blueberry bee and the sweat bee. They actually need to have hollow stems in their gardens, or in your garden, to come out. The sweat bee, if you've never seen, is really small. It's the end of your pinky is maybe bigger than the bee. They're fluorescent green, emerald green. They're absolutely stunning little bee, and they are really important for pollinating many of our important small plants. Or the blueberry bee can only pollinates the blueberries. If we don't have the blueberry bees, we don't get the blueberries that turn into blueberry flowers, or get pollinated to get the blueberries. So these are really important. One of the things that most people don't understand is that when you have your garden, when you cut back your garden in the fall, what you're doing is actually cutting out a whole bunch of important beneficial insects for your garden. They've laid their eggs in your stems of your plants, and if you've cut them back and thrown them out, you're actually throwing out the bees and other insects. And so what I would encourage all of you to do is to not cut back your garden in the fall. If you feel you need to cut it back in the fall, keep it 10, 12 inches off the ground or more. And consider doing it in the spring. And wait until you start seeing the bees out, when you have consistent warm temperatures of 50, 55 degrees outside. Then you're going to start having these all these bees and other insects emerge from the plants. Then you can cut back your plants. I personally don't cut back my plants for winter interest as well. So now we've talked about the insects. Let's talk about where we can get these plants. A couple of my favorite places are for nurseries are the Long Island Natives Nursery in Eastport, and Vicky Bustamante at Nursery, Warren's Nursery. I spelled that wrong. Sorry, it's Warren's, Warrens Nursery. And Vicky, I would contact Vicky or Long Island Natives directly, and go to their website, see what they have, contact them and order your plants before you go. If you go, you're not going to get helped. They're by more appointment only, but what's kind of nice is that you order your plants, and when you show up, everything's ready for you, ready to go, and then you can do a little shopping afterwards if you wish. But pretty much it's easier to pick up. What's really nice about that is you're going to get the plants that are available throughout the entire year. When you go to your local nurseries, more often than not, the only plants that they have are the ones that are blooming at the moment, to encourage you to buy the beautiful plant that's blooming. What I would encourage you to do is get plants that bloom throughout the entire year from April all the way through October. And the best way to do that is to order your plants in one big group, or go to your nursery monthly to get the plants that are in bloom at the right time. LIMPI, the Long Island Native Plant Initiative, we're going to have a fall plant sale. We'll have that coming up soon. Megan, if you don't mind on the chat bar putting in my email address, please, if you're interested in getting more information about the fall plant sale and or volunteering to help us, because we're always looking for help in growing plants. We teach you how to do it and why we're doing certain things certain ways, and we do different things throughout the entire year. Reach out to me and you'll get your, I'll send you links of the next volunteer events. Our volunteer events, we're limiting, normally we have big volunteer events. This year we're not, of course, from COVID, so we're limiting to 8 to 10 people. Wear masks, we social distance, everything's outside. We teach you how to, what we're doing. Currently, we're transplanting our seedlings into bigger pots for the sale. But we also, later in the year, we'll be working on our founder's plot. We'll be collecting seeds and so forth. And so that's all beneficial. If you would like to try to work with your local nursery, please go to your local nursery and ask for native plants, locally genetic native plants, not cultivars. I'll explain that in a minute. And make sure that you get your good plants. And they can buy plants from the wholesalers and deliver for you. You have to ask. Not all nurseries will do it, but if they will do it, whatever you ask for, you're going to need to purchase. So you can't order and then don't take, because that's just not helping anybody out. So please work on that. If you're interested, also, there's a couple great organizations. The one on the Port Washington Peninsula that's in progress is the Rewild program, which is trying to convert lawns to natives. You can reach out to www.rewildlongisland.org, and they will help you get part of the program. They have consulting projects, and they have a plant sale, and so you can get more information. If you're out east, way out east, on the South Fork of the East End, there's a program called 2/3 for Birds, which is another great program. And then there's another group called Perfect Earth, which is really trying to help homeowners become pest pesticide-free maintenance. So I think I don't have it, so I'm gonna talk about it now. Native plants have a scientific name. There's a first name and a last name in Latin. The scientific name, if it says a purple coneflower is not native to Long Island, but I'll use it because most people know it. Echinacea purpurea is the scientific name for purple coneflowers. If you see a quotation mark afterwards, if you see Echinacea purpurea quotation, white swan quotation, that second name that's in there is a cultivar of the native plant. So it's the white swan variety of purple coneflowers. So what has happened is our native plant, Echinacea purpurea, has the full genetic makeup. It's like Homo sapiens that we all are a part of. We are all Homo sapiens. We're genetically, we're all have the full gamut of genetics in our system. However, we just like we all are different. Some are short and some are tall. Some have blonde hair, some have red hair, black hair, brown eyes, blue eyes, robust, not robust, different skin tones. We all facial hair. We may all be different in different ways. It's just like Echinacea purpurea. They have a variety of traits. And what one gentleman did is he took the white flowers of Echinacea purpurea and took only those plants and self-propagated them until they came out with one plant that's the same all the time. And that same plant grown over and over and over again, he named it and he called it white swan. So what has happened is it's lost its genetic variability. And because of the loss of genetic variability, it doesn't have the ability to, it lost some traits. It might not be as robust against diseases, or it might not have as deep roots, or in some cases, it doesn't have any pollen or any nectar. So there's a couple asters, purple domed New England aster that's been bred, and it's lost its nectar source. I don't use that plant anymore because it doesn't provide any nectar for all our pollinators. So really think about trying to use the native first, a native cultivar second, and an alien plant third, if you have a choice. If you see an X in the name, it's a hybrid, and that's another whole story. So I won't go down that path. I just want to give you an idea of what a cultivar is. Okay, so natural communities within a neighborhood. This is a prairie-styled garden. All the plants are planted in an unorganized fashion. But I want to show you what we can do. This is a rain garden, but I want to show you how easy it is to consider planting native plants. We're just going to kill the grass, but we're going to kill the grass with mulch. We put in 4 inches of mulch on top of the grass to kill the grass. Then we had these young elementary school students planting this new garden. So they're actually taking their trowel, stabbing the ground through the grass, pulling the mulch aside, stabbing the ground, wiggling it, making a hole, putting in our native plant and I taught them how to pull the roots, plant our native plant, take their ruler, measure a foot away, do it again. Each student got 6 plants to plant. They planted that whole area in a few classes. 1 year later, it looked like this. It was full grown. The plants were, you can see are touching, really close. This light lavender colored plant here in the front is wild bergamot, Monarda fistulosa. That's a native plant to both Minneapolis, where this garden was planted, and here on Long Island. These magenta flowers in the back are Joe pieweed and marsh milkweed. this dark purple plant way in the back is ironweed. All of these plants are native here as well. This purple plant here in the front is Agastaki hyssop. That's a hyssop plant, and this one's anise hyssop, and it's the leaves smell like anise or licorice, and it's again a native to all of these areas. So all those plants are native here as well as there. But there's a couple plants that aren't native to here that are in this picture. The black-eyed Susans here, this pale purple coneflower, and this yellow flower are all plants that are native to that area, not here, but it doesn't matter. I want to show you how cool it looks just after 1 year. We don't always plant with just perennials. This is a shrub garden only. This, the maintenance man didn't know the difference between a pansy and a petunia, his words, so we actually planted this only in shrubs. This was 5 years later. This is red twig dogwood in the middle and a low growth sumac around the outside edge. I would plant this differently at this time of year, or I would have planted this differently now. I would have probably added a few more species in here. Maybe some of that New Jersey tea that I told you about earlier that has white flowers in June. Maybe some Daravilla linicera dwarf bush honeysuckle, which has yellow flowers blooming right now, dwarf bush honeysuckle. And dwarf bush honeysuckle is about 3 to 4 feet tall, yellow flowers blooming right now, brings in tons of bees and butterflies, and has kind of coppery leaves. It's an amazing plant that would be beautiful here on the North Shore. This is a garden that's all natives. We have purple coneflower, black-eyed Susans, little blue stem grasses. This is ironweed. There's that Monarda again. Got Joe Pye weed. We have some rattlesnake master in there. We have a number of asters that will bloom later in the season. So there's things that bloom from early part of the year, from April all the way through October. This is a full shade garden. I just happened to take this picture at the wrong time of year in the 2-week period that there's hardly any flowers, but there are a few things blooming in the middle here, but these will be orange flowers, which is a Michigan lily that drops and hangs down. There is some wild geranium that just got done blooming. There's some turtle heads that will bloom white later in the season, and Culver's root white later in the season. And we have these great ferns. So there's a whole bunch of different kinds of plants growing here. In the front yard of that same yard, we have Coreopsis, asters, the grasses. The liatris is just done blooming. And you can see that there's a whole bunch of different things blooming in this garden in an organized fashion. This one's primarily shrubs with some perennials. Late fall, so you can see the fall color in the shrubs. This one was designed in a very organized fashion. This is a rain garden, but also mostly native plants. The Target wanted me to build these gardens, but they didn't want to hide the sign. I told them they've been there 60 years. Everybody knows where Target is, but they didn't want to trust me on that. So they wanted the sign to be visible. And I said, so what if I plant it so it points at the sign? And they thought that was a pretty good idea. So if you look up, when you look at this garden, you see the plants, they're all in a row aiming at Target. So that what happens is you don't do it on purpose, but when you see these plants, you just follow the row and then you see Target. So you end up reading Target right away, and it's kind of a slight optical illusion. Or how about this car wash? Wouldn't you like standing by waiting for your car, standing outside with all these flowers? Again, we have Agastaki, hyssop. This is a yellow sunflower, native yellow sunflower called Heliopsis, Helianthoides, or oxeye daisy. Some more bergamot. And so there's a whole bunch of things blooming right here, and it brings in a ton of bees and birds. This is a garden with in the front yard. And what I have noticed is when somebody really goes all out and does a full native garden, what happens is that they get this one really cool garden, and then they build more and do more of the yard. This gentleman has a small patch of grass that he puts his lawn chair out, and he sits out there and listens to the birds and the bees come to his yard, and he can mow the grass in 10 minutes with a real lawnmower that spins. And what I have noticed when you start to have these native gardens is that you spend less time adding anything. There's no water, there's no fertilizers, there's no pesticides ever once the garden is established. And what you end up doing is you spend time with an adult beverage or a Diet Coke, like this gentleman with a smile, and he weeded his garden. He pulled out one weed. He became a very good friend of mine. We left a large portion of his backyard and lawn because his grandkids came over to play ball after school every day. Once the grandkids graduated and went off to college, we slowly converted the rest of his lawn into more natives. This is, I'm standing at an I'm standing at a assisted living facility looking at the adult daycare in the background. And this big open space was one big lawn that got mowed a couple times a week during the cool season and once a week during the summer. And what we did is we converted big chunks of the lawn into a randomly shaped, organic shaped set of gardens. This picture was taken in November, so the flowers aren't really showing anymore, but you can still see it's pretty cool looking with its shrubs and trees. And what happens is the adult daycare folks come out and wander the garden, and the assisted living folks come out and wander the garden or sit on their porch and watch the birds and the bees come and go, and butterflies come and go out of this garden. This garden is in Riverhead, actually. It's all natives in a parking lot at the Riverhead Soil and Water Conservation District and Continuing Education building. And this one is at in Muttontown at the Nassau Soil and Water Conservation District. This garden looks pretty amazing during the August, but it also looks pretty cool late in the season in October when the seed heads are out. You don't have to be 100% native. You can be mostly native. My suggestion is to go 2/3 native plants. However, in my yard, I try to be 80+%. I have a wife that is English, so I have to have a few non-native English plants in the yard, but for the most part, they're mostly native. So anyway, so I'm around 80% in my yard. This is a friend's yard. We have a little grass strip here. We have a peony, not native. We have some hostas and we have some marigolds, but most of the rest of the plants are native. And don't you want to walk into this yard and walk and see what's around the corner? It is a red barn, but it invites you into the yard with a great little design. This is the multi-million-dollar home, and we have a very crazy fun garden, all natives in front of this yard. This is around his roundabout as is in his driveway. Or just by the mailbox. You don't have to go big, just a little bit. When I have larger yards, what I do is encourage people not to plant way back out in the backyard full of lots of plants, but plant all these native plants closer to the deck so that you have a chance to see them closer and to definitely see all the wildlife that comes to it. One of my favorite gardens here on Long Island is it's a small house in East Meadow. Uh, uh, this was spring 2019 planting, fall 2019. You can see all the plants that are going to town. Completely converted the entire front yard from lawn to natives. This is a small garden in Clark Botanical Gardens, all native. The lower right was right after planting. This was a couple years later, and you can see that it's fully grown in. They usually are lower maintenance, less lawn to take care of. You can have them a little more organized or a little less organized, a little more formal. You can create screening with them and be a little more formal. This was right after planting, but all these plants are to grow up high enough to start hiding the windows, looking between townhomes. That hard to mow area, why don't you just plant it in natives? This one is a manufacturing plant. This is the parking lot. In between the parking rows is native plants. This is a bank. Another manufacturing plant. Screening from the neighbors. When you're out on your deck, do you need to see the neighbors? Maybe tall Joe Pye weed is perfect. So I'm running out of time, so I just want to do one more kind of explain of how I design with native plants. I plant in big groups. The bigger and not individual plants, but into big swaths or bundles. And so this might be just a few species with large numbers, or a whole bunch of species in smaller groupings, but I plant them in groups. What I call it is my Sesame Street approach. The reason why I call it my Sesame Street approach is that when I go to weed, it's easier to figure out which is the right plant because and you don't have to be a botanist to know, because the one that doesn't look like the others or is in that organized look, you know, is not the right plant. So if it doesn't look like the others, it's the weed. I like to plant in masses. I learned this from a great gentleman called Piet Oudolf. He was a mentor of mine, and he designed the High Line in New York City. And this is actually the design of the High Line that in one section that he did. And you can see that it's groups of plants. It's not that many species, just groups and repeated patterns. Some of his designs in the Midwest look like this. And my favorite is this one. Looks like a Monet. This is the High Line in New York City. Remember that plant I told you that had 15-foot deep roots called lead plant? There it is, right there. Blooms in June, purple flowers, kind of icy, silvery leaves, brings in tons of bees and butterflies. Even though it can put down roots that are 15 feet, because this is on the High Line and you only have a few feet of soil, it just doesn't have the ability to go any further. That's okay. And the other thing that I do with my native plantings is do a cue of care. A sidewalk or a wall really kind of ties into what you're trying to show. It shows that it's a garden and not a weed patch. Doesn't matter how wild and woolly it looks. Same with a wall. A wall on the back or the front does the exact same thing. It makes the garden look deliberate and not like a weed patch. The garden on the upper left, if you didn't have the split rail fence in there, a lot of people would think it's a weed patch, but as soon as you put that split rail fence in, it's a garden. Or on the bottom right, we have a little arbor. Benches, walkways, bricks, paths, or in this case, a little bird bath that at my attempt of being Zen is all those little things that can help make a garden look deliberate. Now that's brand new planted. You actually saw the garden earlier. It was the one with all the ferns in it. Here's another one. You don't have to put the fence all the way around. You can just put a little piece of it to get people to understand that it was done intentionally. So I'm hoping that this just kind of gives you an idea of what could be with natives, and whether it's flowers or shrubs and grasses, or trees. So this, and to put it in layers. So we have two different kinds of trees providing screening, plus a laurel that will grow up underneath it and really provide a thick barrier along the edge, and have multiple species of plants showing a rise in how things look. So I think that's, I'm done. I'm barely over time, but I wanted to check. I have plenty of time to answer questions. I'll gladly answer questions as long as there's questions in the group.
Thank you very much, Rusty. It was a great presentation. We have a couple of questions, but if anybody else has any further questions, please type them in the chat box, and we'll wait a couple more minutes so that people have some time to do that. But in the meantime, I'll ask you the ones that are already here. Someone asked, do they sell trees also? And I'm assuming that was about the different places to purchase native plants.
Yes. They sell trees and shrubs, as well as the perennials, ferns, grasses. They sell all of those things. In fact, I love going to Vicky Bustamante at Warren's to get my sassafras and blueberries, shrubs, as well as my taller and other tall shrubs like one of my favorite shrubs that I like to put into these shade areas is Viburnum acerifolium, maple leaf viburnum. It has great white flowers, great fall color, white flowers in the spring, fall color in the fall, red berries late in the season that the birds eat. It's kind of a 4-season plant that can handle full shade and gets about 10 to 12 feet tall. And then, or Cornus alternifolia, pagoda dogwood, those are a couple great shade shrubs. And then, of course, you can get any of the trees, oaks, maples, pines, whatever you're looking for, American holly, whatever you might be looking for.
Thank you. Another question is, I have a few roses. Is it advisable to add native ground cover around them?
Oh, absolutely. So when you have roses, blueberries, orchards of apples, or any of those kinds of either cut flowers or fruiting shrubs or trees, I love putting a ground cover, a native ground cover underneath. And it depends on how much sun you have of what kinds of things you may put there. So one of my favorites is strawberries. Strawberries makes a great ground cover, and you get to eat the strawberries afterwards. The native strawberries are an amazing ground cover, or the low bush blueberry. Or if you're worried about, in your case, the roses and trying to reach in to get the strawberries without getting poked, maybe phlox. The creeping phlox is a native plant to this area and makes a great showy display that can cover the ground underneath your shrub that you don't need to do anything to. And it blooms early in the season, and then your roses bloom late into the summer through the fall.
Great, thank you very much. Someone asked if you could give us a list of good native plants.
um, okay, so I'm going to start with this one. The list is too long. I can't tell you a list. The things that I keep mentioning are good starting plants to start thinking about. Um, um, and if you want to send me an email with what you're thinking about for sun shade area, because the list gets longer with each. If you want to send me an email saying I have a site that is what kind of soil or what kind of moisture it gets, is it dry or is it damp? And is it sunny or shady? I can send you a quick list. I'll gladly do that for, there's not that many people in line, so I'll gladly do that for any of you. The best place to find out if the plant is native, that's actually more important. If you Google New York Flora Atlas, Flora, Flora Atlas, it is a great place to, and I'm going to stop my share here. Where's my cursor? It's a great place to go to find out if you to find out if the plant is native or not. So now I'm going to share this.
While you're pulling that up, Rusty, I just want to tell everyone that you can also go to the town sustainability page. And I have actually, obviously it's not an exhaustive list of native plants, but I created a list of hopefully ones that are somewhat easily found on Long Island so you can purchase them. We also have a page that I created that has the plants you can find in town parks. So if we did a big planting, you can see pictures of what they look like and pictures of the gardens that we planted there to give you a better idea of some things where you can actually go and look at them in person. Right. And I'll post the link to the website on the chat as well.
And there's a number of parks that I've been helping out in the town of North Hempstead that have educational signs of what was planted. So for instance, at Manor Haven Preserve, there's a sign at each end that shows what are all the plants. So if you see one that you like, you can go and look it up. So on screen right now is the New York Flora Atlas, and you can do something like click on Nassau County, and it will give you the full long list of all the plants that are found in Nassau County. So it's 250 times 7, whatever that is, 1,700 plants that could be found in Nassau County. And it says here what the name is and whether it's native or not. So slender 3-seed Mercury is native to Nassau County. So here's another trick, is you can go up to the sign up here, and I'll just put in viburnum. Viburnum is the scientific name of a series of great shrubs. Keep scientific name, hit search, and here are all the viburnums that you can find in New York. Then I told you viburnum acerifolium is one of my favorites, maple leaf viburnum. You click on the plant, you can see it's native. You click on the plant, and it shows you where in New York it is native, and it's native in Nassau County and Suffolk County, and it gives you a little more detail. So that's a good way of going about looking up plants. So for instance, here's another one. If you don't know you don't know the scientific name, but you know the common name. So maybe you want to find Christmas fern. I just happen to have Christmas here. So if you click on Christmas, change it to common name and do a search, you'll find Christmas fern and the scientific name and that it's native. The other one that I would also encourage you to do is if you don't know something like Echinacea, I keep saying Echinacea purpurea, which is purple coneflower, is not native. If you don't trust me, you click on here. Echinacea purpurea or palata are both not native to New York, not just Long Island, but all of New York. Okay. The other thing that I wanted to do, somebody asked about crepe myrtle and what they look like. Here you go. Here's a bunch of pictures of crepe myrtle. Blooms in the middle of summer. It's not from here. It's an alien plant. It's a lovely, beautiful tree that's blooming right now through most of the summer. It will provide some nectar for flower or for pollinators, but that's about it. What I like to use about crepe myrtle is so my wife would like me to put one of these in. I might put one in, but underneath it, all around it, I would plant maybe that dwarf bush honeysuckle or some flowers and grasses. So again, all the other plants are native underneath it. Then I don't really worry that the crepe myrtle is not native. Other questions?
I think that's it. I don't see any more questions. So I want to give a very much thanks to Rusty for doing this presentation for us. It's very informative, and I hope everybody will definitely put some thought into putting some native plants in their yards. Thanks everyone for joining us today. And enjoy the very hot summer weather.
Very good. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.